Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. We are here for the Transportation and Commerce Committee meeting, Monday, March 4th at 2 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderman Narayan. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Browning.
Present.
Chair Cone.
Present.
Alderman Narayan. We have 4 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With that, I will entertain a motion on the approval of the meeting minutes from Monday, January 29th, 2024.
I move that we approve the minutes from Monday, January 29th, 2024. Is there a second?
There a second? That's my job, Alderman. Thank you.
We need a second for the minutes.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the
8th.
8th. Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Browning. Chair Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. We have 4 aye votes.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk and members of the committee. We have 2 items that are on the agenda for today's hearing. We've got Board Bill 104 and Board Bill 220. We're going to go ahead. There's a presentation from the president of the CBC related to Board Bill 220. I'd like to start off the meeting with that bill. Okay. Alderwoman from the 8th. Thank you. I'm going to get that right eventually.
This world is not made for short people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Committee. Board Bill 220 is an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment appropriating $15.3 million of interest funds earned from the city's ARPA funding to transfer to the Convention Center to fund some of the renovation work there. You know, this has been a project that we've been working on as a broader St. Louis region for many, many years now. It became clear with some disagreement between the city and county, I should say, before the pandemic. And, you know, I think that the county having reluctance to issue bonds was one of the factors resulting in increased costs of improving our convention center. I don't think there's anybody that could argue that having a convention center, state-of-the-art one, is important to the vitality and the success and the economic development of our city. This is often the first window to a city that professional organizations and people have coming to a convention, being a part of, you know, kind of being forced to be in a city. But I think it's an important aspect of any successful urban community to have a successful and updated convention center. And so with that, the increased costs associated with the delay, many other factors led us to where we are right now, where we do not have the funding appropriated or set aside to do the work that we had planned to do, that we communicated to convention goers and convention planners and prospects that we would be doing. So to remind everybody kind of how we got to the $15 million, you know, when there was an additional gap identified, I want to say 2 years ago, of $100 million. When we won the lawsuit, the unprecedented lawsuit for losing the Rams, the region was awarded a significant amount of money, $30 million of which was set aside specifically to fill in that gap. And here we are with an additional $70 million for the. So what we have before us is a bill that would set aside 15.3 of the interest money that was gained from the unspent ARPA funds to that project. And with that, I've invited Kitty Radcliffe, who we all know, to come and present kind of some of the work that would come out of that and answer questions with this very unfortunate mic situation. Kitty, I don't know what we're going to do here, but hopefully. Take it like this. Here we go. Kitty Radcliffe.
Thank you, Alderwoman Spencer. I will hold on to the mic. And I appreciate that introduction and a very good summary of where we find ourselves today. Just, I guess, as a reminder and for the record, we don't own the building. We're the operators of the building on your behalf. The building is owned by the St. Louis Municipal Finance Corporation, a division, if you will, of the city. And we were very fortunate to get some funding from the county to help with this project. But as Alderwoman Spencer has described it, the costs went up, and the funds that were originally allocated have now all been allocated to Project One. So I'm going to just do a very quick refresher and review on that. And if we could go to the next slide, please. We just call this project AC Next Gen, which is America's Center Next Generation, the future of St. Louis meetings. Next slide, please. As Alderwoman Spencer has described, this building is a critically important part of the economic activity of our community, and it is a front door for St. Louis to thousands of people every week. Last week we had National Association of Independent Schools with their annual convention. This week setting up right now is an industry trade show that's a national trade show for the Halloween and the special events industry. And so every week we drive new economic activity to St. Louis through the use of this building. And it's everyone's goal to make this building competitive. If we can go to the next slide. So the original project envisioned a number of elements, including an expansion to the exhibit hall space with an addition of a westward hall off of the existing building, doubling the number of loading docks that would allow us to get freight for the show that's moving in today, as an example, in faster and out faster so that we can turn the building around more quickly. The addition of some beautiful outdoor event space, including a food farm on the west side of that new exhibit hall space, enclosing the loading docks on the north end to beautify the neighborhood to the which will cover the docks completely, add greenery and a sidewalk on that side of the street, which has never had one, making it more passable for everyone in the neighborhood and those attending events in the Dome, in addition to the convention center, and then adding a new smaller lobby at the intersection of Martin Luther King Drive and 9th Street. All of that is part of Project One and is underway, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But in addition to that, we envision a connectivity from that new lobby at MLK and 9th with a new corridor adding to the west side of the building, taking out one lane of 9th Street to extend the building to add an interior corridor and then a covered sidewalk, which that side has never had in terms of being able to create a better experience for attendees. Opening up to a new pre-function space, a lobby space, if you will, on the west side of the building that would open up outside to a whole new city block outdoor event space, and opening up on the inside to a new ballroom and kitchen, and then a connectivity back to the Washington Avenue entrance with a south corridor, plus a refresh of some of the inside of the building and Washington Avenue. So that's all the original project. If you can go to the next slide, please. Project One that you see here is the project I just described that's underway and is going to be completed in the very near future. Next slide, please. This is the project we're here to talk to you about today. What we've done with the gap that Alderwoman Spencer described of $70 million and the challenges with coming up with that amount of funding in the short term, but yet a number of events that we've got that are critical coming up in 2025. We've modified Project 2 to put the ballroom and the kitchen on to a later date, and worked on making that connectivity to the new space with the new corridor on the west side, the new pre-function space, the south corridor connecting into Washington Avenue, and opening up out onto that new full city block event space. This will make the building, the circulation of the building, complete. People will be able to get to and from any part of the building with that full connectivity in beautiful space, plus exterior space that really improves not only their experience walking to and from hotels, restaurants, and other things, but also the experience of the neighbors around the building, which includes residents to the north. It includes hotels to the west and the south. It includes residents immediately to the south with Bankers Loft, and businesses, T-Rex, the Globe Building, and others that are in that neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is a rendering, this is a schematic design, actually, of the project that we're talking about funding today. North is on the right side of that page. South is on the left side of that page. And that's that new corridor, the new pre-function space, and the south corridor, plus the outdoor event space. Next slide, please. No, go back to the blank. Go back to the blank. And there should be a play button at the bottom, which was showing up on mine when I had it open earlier. But that got you. We need to go back to that. I think I have. Michael, you can help? Thank you. So we shot this from a drone on Saturday just to give you an idea of the scope of the project for those people who've not actually been out there to see it themselves. It was working earlier when we tested it from my laptop, so I know it's there.
Chair Cone, at this moment, we're trying to find it. We do not see the play button.
It was here, but my connection to the Zoom now is gone. Careful, you're plugged in. All right, I'll continue while we wait for that. And so what's left is the drone footage, just to give you a scale of what the project is, and then some rendering showing what we're going to talk about in the future. So the gap on this was estimated a couple of months ago to be about 40 million instead of 70. And so our conversation with the mayor's office, with the comptroller's office, was the president of the board of aldermen, Alderwoman Spencer, is that by removing the ballroom and the kitchen from the project now, we have been able to work with the architects and the engineers to design this modified plan that can start immediately, but still has a gap in funding. So the 15.3 million is a good start to that. And let's see, it looks like maybe we have Laptop coming back. Perfect. That's it. Except we're going to get an echo. It's all right. Got it? Do you want to do it from here? Share it from here. So what you're looking at is the loading docks along Cole Street, and this is the new exhibit hall, which, as you can see, is in its final phase. There'll be a food farm immediately in front of that hall. That'll be the last thing will be done. They're putting all the metal panels up now. And that's where that new lobby will be at Martin Luther King and 9th. But everything else that you're seeing here all along this wall down 9th Street for a couple of blocks will be the new project. We'll be extending the building, adding an interior corridor, adding an exterior covered sidewalk, ending at that block, which will be a full outdoor event space that will be connected into the building with a new pre-function lobby. And hopefully that gives everybody an idea on the scope. So this is the rendering showing what you just saw, the start. We made that turn when the metal panels are finished and going to the lobby. This is the lobby at Martin Luther King and 9th Street. Do not pay attention to the numbers 231. The architects were drinking some good Guinness that day. This is the new corridor. This is the new project. So you can see it's 2 city blocks long. There's an interior glass walled corridor plus an exterior covered sidewalk that starts at Convention Plaza and goes to Martin Luther King. This is the new pre-function space that opens up into the building, into that corridor, and outside to the outdoor event space. And then this is the outdoor event space opening up into the building. And that's it. Here we are. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Great. I just want to, can we? Yeah. I just want to make sure for those in the audience that are here to testify in opposition or in favor of Board Bill 220, you can register over here in the corner with the clerk. But meanwhile, we'll entertain questions from the committee with respect to Board Bill 220.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one of the things Kitty and I had talked about was discussing kind of what this $15.3 million would essentially buy us, recognizing that there's a additional unmet need. And we talked just briefly about, just so we have full transparency and clarity on what it is we're proposing, maybe fund with that, and what might still be an outstanding need. If I may, just kind of, we could talk about that very briefly.
Yeah, so this, the 15.3 is a part of what's needed to that project that I just showed you. We are still waiting for the, working with Board of Public Service and the architects to get that final number, but it's around 40 million. And so 15 would still leave about 25.
So just for setting expectations, what it is we're funding and what might still be outstanding at the end of potentially passing Board Bill 220. And
Is the mic on?
mine is.
Can you hold it a little closer?
I can hold it just like this.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's going to be some additional work that's going to need to be done to find additional funding for the 40 million, then of course to get us up to the full 70 for the initial proposal that we as a community had kind of signed off on. So that's the end. That concludes my presentation here at the Board of Aldermen.
Thank you, Alderwoman. We'll go ahead and take questions from the committee. Vice Chair Spencer, I would imagine you don't have questions of yourself, but I have been in conversations with you that have been interesting where I think you have. But Alderman Narayan, has he joined us online?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Just, can you go over, what are the, I know funding this is a part of what you need, but what are some of the options that you're looking at for funding the rest of what's needed and what that timeline would be?
So I know that the mayor and the comptroller, Treasurer Lane, and the president's office are all looking at a number of options. I don't know where those stand at this point, and it's not really for me to say. But I know everybody is really focused on trying to get all the funding because this is a critical thing for our community.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Alderman Browning.
Thank you. Along the same lines, so it went from 70 million, but now it's 40 million after cutting the ballroom and the kitchen. And now we are seeking to plug some of that with 15 million. If you are unable to find the additional 25 million, what happens to the 15?
Well, there are other improvements that we need to make in the building that aren't funded with the present plan. But the challenge is going to be, you can't just take the 15 million and add it to the project and do a piece of the corridor or the pre-function space or the south connector, because the HVAC systems, the electrical wiring, the plumbing, the roofing, it's all tied in together.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to nitpick at what needs fixing because that's not my expertise, but it is yours. So I do trust you on that, and I want to make sure that we're getting you the money that's necessary. I would be in favor of giving this 15 million with hopes that you can get the additional 5 million. Knowing that the Rams departure most impacted the convention center. At this time, I'm not in favor of using Rams money for that because we are still going through engagement on how to spend that. And we're facing unprecedented threats of losing the earnings tax or other things that might put our city in jeopardy. But spending 15 million off of the ARPA interest seems to me the best option here. And I do think that 9th Street corridor especially needs improvement. If you've if you've parked on that side of the stadium and tried to walk around, it's awful, just to be plain about it. But I think this is a worthwhile project, and so I would be in favor of authorizing that today. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to also have a couple follow-up questions here with respect to the project. So this is the allocation of the ARPA interest, which is by $15.3 million. We've identified that there's a larger gap. It's not the 70 million that was originally identified for the larger scale project that included the ballroom and kitchen movement activity, but instead we're moving forward with a scaled back version of the project, which would create that corridor along the 9th Street area, and then to improve connectivity between the new entry point, that's where the garden will be, and then also the various ballrooms that are over there and to the main access point along Washington Avenue, correct?
That's right.
So with that, and I know you and I have had a couple conversations about this in the last week or two, and that you're expecting some final numbers, hopefully this week with respect to the project from the architects and project managers. But the 15.3 million, which we're voting on today, how is that going to be spent? Like, where are we going? Because obviously there's still a gap, right? We don't know precisely what that is, but there would be a gap of roughly 20, 25 million, maybe $30 million that's out there once this is passed. So while we're finding that other money, where would this be deployed?
Well, I think for now it'll go, the Board of Public Service is managing this project. So, and working with the comptroller's office, it would still be held in the city. Just to be clear, it doesn't come to us. I mean, I'm just kind of the spokesperson on this as the manager of the complex, but the money all stays within the city, and it would stay tied to the project fund. There's a coordination team that is representatives of the city. There's a representative of the mayor's office, the comptroller's office, the St. Louis Municipal Finance Corporation. The county has a representative, and St. Louis Development Corporation, SLDC, has a representative. So any decisions that'll be made about the project moving forward would be made by that coordination team. So there's no danger of like spending the money on something unrelated to this project. But I think when the final numbers are in and the final funds are allocated, then the final decisions can be made about whether there's value engineering that has to happen, or what, to be able to move forward.
Okay. So there would be no intent at this point in time to move forward with spending the 15.3 million until we have a better understanding of the scaled back plans?
Yeah, it would just be added to the project fund by the coordination team, but
okay.
There is money still from the $30 million from the ramp settlement. So that money is available for the work that can continue now.
Sure. Okay. Well, I look forward to continuing the conversation around this. I know there's still a pretty big lift out there, but appreciate the Alderwoman for working with the mayor and the comptroller, the president's office, and at least getting this portion allocated towards the gap that's there. And are there any further questions from the committee on Board Bill 220 or comments? Alderman Narayan? Hearing none?
Nothing on my end. Nothing on my end. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll note, Mr. Chair, that no one has signed up besides Kitty to speak on the issue.
Yeah, I didn't see anyone move over there after I made the announcement, so I figured as much. But Madam Clerk, are there any written comments that were provided?
No.
Thank you. With that, I will entertain a motion on Board Bill 220.
I move that we pass Board Bill 220 out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderman from the 6th, that we pass Board Bill 220 out with a due pass recommendation. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer? Aye. Alderman Ryan?
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez?
Aye.
Alderman Browning?
Aye.
Chair Cone? Chair Cone, do we need to see Mr. Narayan's face for his vote?
I did not catch that. Yes, we do. Thank you, Madam Chair. There he is.
I'm here. Sorry. It's an aye. It's me.
We have 5 aye votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Thank you, Madam Chair. With that, your vote to sustain, with that, you passed out Board Bill 220 with a do pass recommendation. The next board bill that's on the agenda for today is Board Bill 104, introduced by Alderwoman Daniela Velasquez. Alderwoman, you have the floor. And just as a reminder, if any of you are here to testify either in favor or opposition to Board Bill 104, I would encourage you to register with the clerk. There should be sign-in paper over there for you.
Get all my devices settled. All right, Chair Cone, are you ready? All right, well, thank you, Chair and members of the Transportation and Commerce Committee. And today I will present about Board Bill 104. I will not be asking for a vote on this bill today, and I want one other clarification. I'm going to grab this mic. Why I did file a committee substitute, and you have both the original and I believe the committee substitute. I am not going to ask for the committee to adopt the committee substitute today, just to make sure that things are clear, and there's no confusion. And for folks in the audience, some of you have seen the committee substitute. The notes on the board or on the presentation refer to the committee substitute. So the 2 big changes in the committee substitute and the original bill are, one, that the committee substitute will be up to 50 employees, which is what you'll see and what we've discussed. And then the other change is that instead of Slate as being the office, it's a new office. So just want to note the discrepancies, but that's what we'll go over. Also a budget item, can we get a clicker for the Kennedy Room next session? Okay, so why do we need fair scheduling? So workers across the income spectrum are struggling to care for their families while holding jobs that demand around-the-clock availability. For workers in many industries, particularly hourly workers, unpredictable hours and inflexible schedules are widespread issues. Ensuring workers have fair, predictable schedules is a matter of gender, racial, and economic justice. Women and caregivers, and disproportionately women of color, are more likely to feel the negative impact of unfair and inflexible scheduling practices and the challenges of balancing the competing demands of work and care. So just a broad overview there. This is not, we are not the first place to look at a bill like this or to look at legislation like this. Currently, as you see, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington, D.C. have some version of this. Now, I will say that they are all different. And then again, there are other cities that have fair scheduling or predictive scheduling that have passed on their books: Chicago, Evanston, Berkeley, Los Angeles, Seattle, SeaTac, just a few. So I think a big thing, and I think many of you who are here to testify have heard this, Board Bill 104 is preempted. That means that currently under the current state statute of 290.528, even if this bill were to go in effect tomorrow, which it actually is a 60-day effect, we could not actually do it because we are preempted by state law. So really, the intent is to make sure employers do not repeatedly engage in poor scheduling practices. What the bill does require is a good faith estimate and a good. Basically, these estimates are made in good faith. First-time violators only receive a warning, and then there, as we'll go into in this bill, there are lots of exceptions or things around that. So the intent is really to make sure that people have the ability to both take care of their families economically and also live their lives, and make sure that they can have appropriately planned for childcare, for care for their family, for themselves. So Section 1 definitions, what we define it as employee or is any individual affected by an employee for a wage or salary, including but not limited to a full-time employee, part-time employee, or seasonal employee or temporary worker. The work is scheduled for a regular shift or an on-call shift, and again, qualifies as an employee entitled to minimum wage under that same 2.9.5 statute. What we define as employer is any individual, partnership, association, corporation, trust, or any persons of group acting directly or indirectly in the interest of an employer in relation to an employee. And again, this is where there's a difference in what you might see filed online, the committee substitute. Here is where we're talking about 50 employees or more, and the original bill has 15. So back to the predictive scheduling or fair scheduling transparency, one of the requirements is employers must give a good faith estimate schedule for the first 90 days. This good faith estimate is non-contractual. It is, hey, here's what I think you'll be working, here's what days, about how many hours, and written employee notice of an employee schedule must be provided within 14 days of the schedule. Written copies of work schedules must be accessible to employees. An employee can provide written consent to work hours outside of the work schedule. This does also point out that an employee who is a victim of domestic violence or sexual violence can request that their work schedule is not posted where others can see. So here's some of the details of what we're talking about of a schedule. So if an employer adds hours or shifts to it or changes to the date and time of a location within 14 days of the work schedule, they pay the employee 1 hour of extra at their regular rate. And we're going to get into some of the exceptions in a second. If an employer cancels a scheduled shift within 14 days, they will pay the employees for the hours of the canceled shift at their regular rate. So some of the exceptions for scheduling, if an employer will not be found in violation or these do not apply if the employee requested the shift change in writing, the scheduled change is as a result of an agreed upon shift change or shift swap, and coverage between employees and the employer's operations cannot begin or continue due to, again, a threat to employee-employer property, issues with the public utility or transportation. The current legislation says act of God, but something like a fire, a flood, or natural disaster, I know that there are questions what if we have a snow day, what if the roads are closed, things like that, this does not apply. Civil authorities recommend that work does not begin or continue. So next, Section 3 is access to hours. So a few things: employer must offer new extra shifts to current employees before hiring new employees. Employer must provide written and email notice of new extra available shifts. Any employee of the business can apply, but employees already working basically get priority. And the notice is posted for 3 days unless it's urgent. Email to employees. And employees' written acceptance of extra shifts constitutes written consent to accept those extra shifts outside their scheduled work. If no employees sign up within 3 days, the employee can give shifts to employees from other locations. If no employees sign up within the 3 days, the employer can hire new employees. And employers are encouraged to provide relevant trainings to ensure that current employees can accept these shifts. So again, this is really designed to protect workers. And, you know, what I've heard from talking to folks is that a lot of places are actually doing a lot of this scheduling out in advance in more than 14 days. So Section 4 is notice and posting, so it just explains what employers need to do that. Section 5, again, this is, you know, back to protecting workers. The employers may not discriminate against employees for exercising their rights under this ordinance. So this does not apply to negotiating agreements from collective bargaining agreements that will interfere with existing collective bargaining agreements. And then the provisions of this ordinance can be waived in future collective bargaining agreements as long as the waiver is set forth and clear and unambiguous. So Section 7 goes into retention and inspection of records. Employees shall retain records for 3 years. That contains the current and former employees' work schedules, the written correspondence of these agreements of the scheduling, and the good faith estimates to new and existing employees. And then Section 8, as I mentioned, this new office, and in the original filing, it was listed as Slate, and the committee substitute, it will be office established to deal with employment-related complaints. And and then Section 9. So penalties. The employer in violation will receive a written warning for the first violation. Again, this is a written warning. Following the initial written warning, if there is an offense found, the employer will be issued, and it's up to the court, I have to say, up to a $500 fine per additional offense for each employee and each day the violation occurs. And then this ordinance doesn't affect an employee's civil rights to take additional actions. So Section 10, it's not the only remedy for employment violations. There is a severability clause to this as well. And then again, this legislation is currently preempted, so it's not, even if we were to pass it, it would be 60 days after the resolution passes, but it would not go into effect unless the state law or court case changes it. So with that, I know we have a lot of folks here who want to speak. I'm going to offer it for questions now, but try to keep the presentation side of this relatively short. I know it's a pretty dense bill, but want to just stop there.
I am going to just allow members of the committee an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have before we take testimony. And then we'll turn it over to the clerk to go through those that are here to speak in favor and opposition. Vice Chair Spencer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask on the front end, and then maybe we'll have questions at the end of testimony as well. Okay. The state law that needs to change, is this do you have the preemption language? I guess my question is, does a preemption law need to be, would it be stricken, or would there be new protections added to state law? What would the mechanism, what could a mechanism at the state level look like? My question being kind of brought up because I don't know what the state law looks like. Does it banish cities or municipalities from having fair or legislation like this that could just be stricken? In other words, cities across the state could or would have different things, or would it necessitate that the state pass something like the numerous states you outlined, that it would need to be proactive? In other words, it would implement something like this at the state level automatically. Do you have the preemption language? I think it might help me understand what state action
What would need to happen for it to not be?
Yes.
So that's a great question. As I understand it, this is rolled up into wage and benefits in that law, and I think I can get a more definitive answer for you. As I understand it, the municipalities can't regulate things like this, but I don't know the exact. I can get back to you on what that exact language could look like, or what that may look like.
I think that would be helpful just to understand if it would be like, for example, when we were talking about the gun bill, there's a specific law on the state books that says specifically municipalities cannot legislate in these particular ways. I don't understand if the state law, the preemption law that we're discussing, has something language like that.
It is like that, but
or
I think that they would have to, but I want to double check on that for sure before I definitively tell you. But we'll do some research and get back to you and pull that statute
Okay.
and see where that is. And that's because it's like in everything. Part of it is your old minimum wage bill. Like there's a bunch of things that are rolled up into that 290.5 statute that are benefits, pay. It's a bunch of things.
Okay. On the enforcement piece, the fiscal note here has a allocation of $543,000 for a new office. One of the, I guess the question is twofold. If the law is still preempted, would those funds be allocated? And number two, if the law isn't preempted and goes into effect, where would the funds come from within the city, just regular general fund? I know we fight every year for potholes and all the other things, so I'm curious if we've thought about kind of under what department it would go, and if we don't, if it is still preempted, will that budgetary line item still be effective?
My understanding is that I don't think it would make sense to fund something that is already preempted for something that we would never know when it might pass.
Okay.
I think that figuring out where that, if it does, if we see a time where this is not preempted, where that money would come out of the budget is definitely a question I think that we need to figure out. But I don't see it as something that we would take out of the budget.
Oh, okay. So is it, I guess I'll look and see if that, so this whole piece of law, this whole law does not go into effect without a preemptive action at the state level. So in other words, the allocation of those funds would not
Start, I mean,
start
right.
without, okay. So that makes sense.
And but I think it would, next time we have this conversation, I mean, making sure that the language is clear in the bill, because it doesn't make any sense to me to why would you fund something in, essentially perpetuity when we could use that money for potholes or anything else.
So then my other question is related to the residency of employees. So if we have a company that has several locations, one of which is in the city, one is in the county, how does the 50 employee count? Is it for the company, or, so I was thinking about McDonald's, for example, versus a restaurant or a collection of restaurants here that may be owned by, we had Ben Paremba here last week, but he has a series of restaurants within the city and county, and how the counts kind of apply to those collections of companies, or
I think it depends how they're structured, right? If each, you've got I'm just making stuff up here, but you've got a franchise, and if each franchise is under a separate like LLC, right? That would be for just the whole one. And your question about the location and residence, there's nothing in this bill that talks about whether an employee is a resident of the city or not. It's whether it's the location of the business.
okay, so I was just thinking in terms of like, if you've got a business that has an office here and also has several offices in St. Louis County and St. Charles County, and together they have 100 employees, but only 27 of them work here, but or 50 of them work here, but half the time they're traveling around and doing plumbing work in other parts of the region. I'm just curious how that sort of like.
Well, I think it would be by location. So, I mean, if they, I guess the question you're asking is if they do the scheduling. Is that essentially, because it would be location by location. So you have two different branches of X business, and one location posts the schedule within the 14 days and the other does not, then it would differ from location to location.
I guess my question is a little more broad than that. If this applies, it's my understanding, to companies that have 50 employees or more, correct? So then the question in my mind is, how do we determine which companies have 50 employees? If I've got a Flanagan Paints that has an office here in St. Louis, 3 of them in the city, and 7 of them in St. Louis County, and collectively they have 200 employees, but some of them work here, some of them work
Right,
here.
but it would be like by location. I mean, so if they're, I mean, that's, again, we could continue to discuss it, but it would be if a location in the city is scheduling, I mean, you're scheduling for employees at one location, so the 7 are in the county are in the county, you've got the 3 in the city, if they're all 3 doing the same thing at the same time, you know, or are they scheduling it differently?
I guess my question is more to which companies does this apply? Let's maybe take a more concrete example like Starbucks. Since they have several locations in the city, but only 7 of them, only, you know, the one on Kings Highway has 14 employees. Collectively, they have,
It would be dependent on how they're structured. And then your question about location, I mean, it would be if the schedules for the shifts if they're different, are they scheduling it all at the same time from their headquarters? And are they scheduling it for all the locations at the same time? Because what we would be looking at would be at that, I mean, if the schedules are posted for that place of business.
I guess I'm trying to understand which businesses this applies to. So would this apply to St. Louis City Starbucks as a company that employs several hundred people in the city? I'm assuming yes, even though they have lots of different locations.
Right. I mean, I don't know how they're structured. I don't know if they're structured as individual, if they're one big company, and how they do their scheduling. So if they're doing their scheduling from corporate headquarters, that would go in and they're all doing their corporate scheduling at the same time for each individual location.
Okay.
I mean, I think that, I mean, that's something that we can talk more about, but I think I understand it from location to location, and yes, that they would apply if they're a city, but it wouldn't apply to the ones in the county, even if they had locations in the city and the county.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking like, well, if a business, so for example, I sent you an email earlier today about a company that has several locations. They each have 18 employees. I was trying to figure out if their collective company with their,
Well, if it's a collective company, right, but I guess I think you're kind of throwing out a few different scenarios. So are you asking if there's one company with more than 50 employees and they have different locations in the city, and or if they schedule them from a centralized location, which is what I'm trying to get at, or if they have a different structure? So are you asking if we should, I mean, so I can look into that email that I just read that you just sent me a few minutes ago. But I think that those are other questions that have to be answered to answer your question.
so I guess I'm trying to figure out the trigger to which these apply. It sounds like whether or not they do the scheduling for all the people at once would be the trigger, or I thought it was a company with 50 employees. Is that
Well, the trigger is
the state law?
the
But
state
no,
law.
No, but I mean, to determine whether or not it applies to company A, my understanding that this was going to apply to companies or businesses with more than 50 employees.
Right, correct.
I was trying to understand further how the 50 employees was calculated.
Right, and you're suggesting in different scenarios, and I'm saying it depends how if those 50 employees, are they part of what you described are they part of something bigger? Or is it like multiple branches under multiple LLCs? Or multiple structures, right? Is it 200 employees overall? I feel like.
Okay.
If I may, it just,
I was just trying to
so
understand
the,
of it, but
right, so the way the board bill is written, you know, whenever there's someone doing business in the city of St. Louis city limits, they have to register with a license collector. And during that registration process, they also identify roughly an approximate number of employees that they have. But it would be anyone that has a business license to operate a business within the city of St. Louis. And then the definition of employer would then be kind of levied against anyone who is currently a licensed business within the city. So if they have over 50 employees, they're licensed in the city of St. Louis as a business doing whatever as it's currently written, any type of business, would then be, kind of held to account underneath the bill.
I thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I was just trying to figure out, like, companies that have multiple locations, some in the city, some in the county, some of the employees are in the city, some in the county, and then thinking about like franchisees like McDonald's, where each one might be franchised and maybe only have 13 employees, but collectively have several hundred in the city, and how that sort of works. And to, if the 50 is just, 50 in the city, or if, like, if you've got, a Sherman-Williams or whatever, and they've got several locations, but it sounds like maybe it depends on how the scheduling is done. And I can, maybe the mechanics, maybe I'm not asking my question very clearly, so I was just trying to get a feel for how those specifics were determined. But it sounds like it's a little more complicated. So I think I'll just defer the rest of my questions until after we have some testimony.
Alderman Narayan,
No questions. Thank you.
Alderman Browning.
I'll defer until after we hear public testimony.
Okay, with that, we'll dive into the public hearing process. And again, if you haven't already, if you're here to testify either in favor or opposition to the bill, please register with the clerk over here in the corner. We are going to try and keep, Madam Clerk, how many folks have registered to testify so far?
Right now, I have a total of 14.
Okay. So if we can keep comments to under 5 minutes, preferably, generally 3 minutes is a standard that's used around here, but if you could please keep them to under 5 minutes, I would appreciate it. And then, Madam Clerk, if you could call, let's start with folks who are opposed to the bill first, and then
So what we would normally do, Chair Cone, is go one in support, then one in opposition.
That's fine.
And since we have more in opposition, I will just start with one in support and go two in opposition and back.
Okay.
So we're going to start with one in support, Mr. Dorian. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Dorian Singleton of SEIU Local 1.
How y'all doing today?
Good afternoon.
My name is Dorian Singleton. I'm with SEIU Local 1.
You may want to turn your mic on, I think. It should be green. We have to swear you in. Could you please raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Yes, again, my name is Dorian Singleton. I'm with SEIU Local 1. I work out at Fairmount City, FanDuel. I've been a part of the union now for about, I've been a union member for 15 years. Been involved with the union now for about 2. And with that, I feel like it's very important that I come here today and speak on behalf of the non-union workers on passing Board Bill 104. I know it would make it fair all around for everybody, especially for the ones that want to work. I have worked non-union jobs and witnessed and seen favoritism and families get picked over for time slots, overtime, and promotion, and it's not fair or right. I know everyone can't be union, but passing this bill would definitely put order and fairness on the table. If passed, I know it would help the working people tremendously. I believe more people will be willing to come in when they are not scheduled to. They won't feel like it was forced. They can come in with a positive attitude. When workers don't have control over their work schedules, it makes it harder and add on to the stress, to the work environment and home life, on top of paying bills. But with passing this bill, it can literally save you time and money, giving people more opportunities to pursue things like education or trade to better their future. I feel I had to come here today to speak, not just for non-union workers, but for everybody that wants fairness all around the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have in opposition, Mr. Buddy Lau, Missouri Restaurant Association.
Thank you for having me today. I have a script, but I do want to address.
Mr. Lau?
Oh, I'm
Would you
sorry.
please raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Spencer, you had asked a couple questions earlier about the state statute, and it's 290.528. And I'll just read a quick excerpt before I get to my testimony here. An employer is, I wanted to start at 3, sorry. Employment benefits, anything of value that an employee may receive from an employer in addition to wages and salary. The term includes but is not limited to health, disability, retirement, profit sharing, death benefits, group accidental death and disbursement benefits, paid or unpaid days off from work or holidays, sick leave, vacation, personal necessity, in terms of employment, attendance, or leave practices. The political subdivisions, any municipality, special district, local government, body, county, city, town, or village. Notwithstanding any of the provisions of the law to the contrary, no political subdivision shall establish, mandate, or otherwise require an employer to provide to an employee benefits or a minimum or living wage. So that's the state statute that this ordinance completely violates. That would have to be overturned at the state level for this to take effect. So therein lies my real question is, why would the city of St. Louis want to pass an ordinance that is in violation of state statute and waste all of this time when I just watched Bill 220, which was really meaningful to this city and to jobs and to employment and to infrastructure? That's where your energy should be, not here. But I'll get to my testimony, so thank you. I'm Buddy Law, the CEO of the Missouri Restaurant Association. My office is located at 1417 West 47th Street in Kansas City, Missouri. However, I do have a local executive director here in St. Louis. His name is Bill Gomel. The Missouri Restaurant Association represents over 80 restaurants in the city of St. Louis. Those are our members that are in the city proper, St. Louis. Our members all oppose Board Bill 104 for multiple reasons. First, as I just stated, the bill is unconstitutional and is preempted by state statute. Bill 104 references, as I mentioned, state statute 290.528. This statute specifically restricts the scope of benefits and prohibits local municipalities from broadening the types of benefits that an employer must furnish. In 2017, House Bill 1194 overhauled the law preventing cities in Missouri from imposing additional regulation on employers. This clear and unequivocal language made plain the General Assembly intent to prevent local laws from attempting to place additional requirements on employers through the provision of additional wages and employee benefits. BB 104, labeled as fair scheduling, is an attempt to pass additional benefits and pay that an employer must provide to employees working within the city of St. Louis. This bill violates state law by mandating a 14-day advance notice of scheduling and liability for predictive pay should the employer make changes to the schedule. The law clearly states that municipalities cannot dictate anything of value that an employee may receive from an employer in addition to wages and salary, attendance, and terms of employment. Other areas specifically preempted and considered unconstitutional. Prior to the start of employment, the employer must provide a new employee with a good faith estimate in writing and projected work hours for the first 90 days of employment. Also, written notice of the employee's work schedule shall be made available no less than 14 calendar days before the first day of any work schedule. If an employer initiates a change to the employee's schedule less than 14 calendar days prior to the first day on which the shift is scheduled to take effect, the employer is responsible for providing the employee with predictive pay. So if I change the schedule within 14 days and I cancel your shift, I have to pay you to work? Restaurants are an integral part of the St. Louis infrastructure. We are the industry of opportunity. We need every one of our employees. We value their contribution to our patrons. We treat our employees with dignity and respect. They're our family. With all due respect, we do not need the St. Louis Board of Aldermen telling restaurant owners how to run a business, or you just came and dined with us. BB 104 will encourage good family-owned restaurants to relocate outside of the city limits to avoid unnecessary bureaucracy. We would encourage the St. Louis Board of Aldermen to engage the Missouri Restaurant Association in legislation prior to introducing bills so that we can help craft language that is beneficial to employers, employees, and the city of St. Louis. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Dan Shaw, if I'm correct. Mr. Shaw, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Last time I said I do, it cost me 30-plus years of happy marriage. I thank you for being here today. Thank you for inviting us. I am Dan Shaw, the Executive State Director for the Missouri Grocers. Many of your independent grocery stores within the city of St. Louis are members of ours. Our current employment situation, if you haven't noticed, we need more employees. During the pandemic, we were considered essential employers, and we couldn't get enough employees. We're still in that situation. And what you've seen over the last few years, the explosion of the self-checkouts, we're losing that one-to-one connection. But we're going to figure a way to do it. So we want employees to work. We want them to be happy, and we want to serve the community. While, Alderwoman, I appreciate the intent of your bill, and I think it's absolutely, most of our members are doing the right thing and trying to make sure they accommodate their needs of their employees. If so-and-so calls in sick today, I still need somebody there to check so I can get somebody else. I don't want to have to bring in sick employees or have employees stay home because I can't bring somebody else in. So we appreciate the intent, but I was taught a long time ago to look at the unintended consequences, the space between the lines on any bill that you read. And Alderwoman Spencer, you had a comment about how this would apply. I went back and read here. If you just give me a minute here, I don't want to lose my place. It says, if the employer is a franchise within the meaning of the Missouri State Statute, all employees of franchise associated with the same franchisor or network of franchisors, wherever located, shall be counted in the aggregate and determine whether this employer is responsible. So if you have a produce stand that has one employee in the city of St. Louis, but 52 in St. Louis County, it would apply to that individual the way it is written here, in my interpretation of it. So I think, I hope that answers your question you had earlier. I don't know if it muddies it or makes it better, but our interpretation is that if you have one employee working in the city, but you're company-wide, you have over 50, it would apply. So I think when you look at this bill, you have to look at long and short-term effects of it. Short-term, it was going to cause cost of employees, hours, it's going to raise those. And right now we're in a part of shrinkflation, I think is what they're using the term now. Food prices are not going down. And it's not because the grocery store has taken their typical 1% margin and taken up to 10%. Many cases, there's many times that stores are actually losing money, but they continue to operate to serve the community. What do we do going forward with that? What about long term? How will this influence the future? I don't know if you understand some of the regulations of the grocery industry. We have to maintain 4 climates in the store at any one day for a good grocery store. So your produce stays fresh, your vegetables, all these things. There's a mandate coming down from the federal government that we have to go from a low pressure refrigeration system to a high pressure in 2 years. That's going to be millions of dollars per store. retailers are going to start making decisions on whether they want to reinvest or build ground up. They're making those decisions now. And it may be just a refrigeration issue. They may be able to survive that. Do they want this other regulation when they're already doing many of those same things? By your own testimony earlier, you said that many of the companies are already doing this. If we want to keep employees showing up, we have to do these things. And I did have a question. First off, if we don't reinvest and we don't build ground up or new stores or reinvent the grocery space, what does that allude to? More food deserts. We already have enough food deserts in the city of St. Louis. They can't all be served by a Dollar General, which this would certainly apply to. We need good quality grocery stores that care about the community. And as we touched on the physical note, and whether the 500,000 is coming out of the whatever bucket it is, I would rather talk with you and the restaurants and the board president about how we can use that $500,000 a year to help with food deserts.
Your
And
time.
I know I'm way over, and I apologize. I
But you
forgot
just
to,
hit 5 minutes, so
so
thank
I
you.
appreciate your time. Like the Restaurant Association, we're willing and able and wanting to be part of the solution here. We want to make sure people in the communities have those services they need to eat healthy and enjoy the food they eat. Thank you very much. Is there any
Thank you.
questions?
Next, we have in opposition, Mr. David
Madam Clerk,
Overfelt.
so we can take questions from the committee. Does anyone have questions?
Had a quick question.
Sure.
I didn't catch your first name.
Dan?
Dan. I appreciate you pointing this out. You kind of was going through that myself here. But you did mention, I mean, if the grocery store industry is doing all these things that are outlined in the bill, is there a problem with, I mean, I'm just trying to vet the whole concept here. If you're already doing all these things.
We're doing most of those things.
Okay.
Some of them
What are
by
the-
collective bargaining agreement, but also by good faith, by being good. But not every day is the same. If you've ever worked in a grocery store, every day is different, just like in the restaurants. It's different every day. Does it rain? If it rains, some of our clientele won't go out in the rain because they have to carry a bag home in the rain. So, you know, it's Saturday. You expect a lot of people to be in. We want the flexibility to serve our community and treat our employees. And we think through the experience of working in this industry, we can do it better than the way the government would tell us. We just want that flexibility.
That's helpful. Thank you, Dan.
Because I don't want my mom or your mom walking down the street with a bag full of paper bag, because those are more environmentally friendly, right? We don't want the bottom to fall out as you're walking home with the groceries in the rain. So,
Just out of curiosity, since we're asking questions here, what's the average size of a grocery store in the city of St. Louis?
average size?
In terms of employees, number of employees?
I think, you know, the great thing about the city of St. Louis is that you have a variety. You have your bigger, larger stores. You have your mega chains from outside. Then you have the good chains that have taken care of the city of St. Louis for years. And then you have some of your mom and pop. I get in trouble. My grandfather would be yelling at me for calling it mom and pop stores. But you have your corner markets. So we have a great abundance. It's just sometimes not where we need them.
Do you represent convenience stores as well as?
We do have convenience stores as part of our membership, yes.
Okay. So convenience stores in the city of St. Louis are much different than grocery stores in the city of St. Louis, and we don't have very many corner grocery stores left in the city of St. Louis. Most of them are your larger, brands, Schnucks, Aldi's. I mean, Shop and Save went out of business. Fields Foods went out of business. So
You have Save-A-Lots, Walmarts, Dollar Generals.
we don't have Walmart in the city of St. Louis. Dollar General isn't typically classified as a grocery store. It's
But they
more-
do accept SNAP. So a
So-
lot of people do spend their SNAP dollars in a Dollar General.
But how many employees does a typical General Dollar have or a Schnucks?
I'm not real, I would say Dollar General has a lot less, probably closer to the 30 total for a month maybe. And depending upon the size and scale of a major retailer, they're going to have several hundred.
Okay.
because a lot of them are part-time young individuals or senior citizens as well.
Mhm.
And sometimes the senior citizens don't want to come out in the bad weather, or if it's going to be too hot, they don't want to come in and have to push carts. So
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
I've taken up 20 minutes, haven't I, or something? I apologize. Thank you. Shop local.
Absolutely.
Next, we
Clerk.
have David Overfelt, Missouri Retailers Association in opposition.
Madam Clerk, I think you're supposed to call someone from the pro side.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we decided to do 3. We only have 5 in support. So I'm evening out 3 per 5, 3.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Oh, I'm sorry. I've watched him do this 3 times.
Mr. Overfelt, your right hand, please.
Oh, sorry.
Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm David Overfelt. I'm the president of the Missouri Retailers Association. I have been working in association and retail management for 4 decades. It's been quite a few years since I've been to the City Hall. I think Quincy Troop and Tom Villa were here at that time, and others that I met and worked with at the state capitol. We were incorporated in 1933 by the courts of St. Louis City, and when the legislature changed to annual sessions and started filing 2,000 bills a year, we moved to Jefferson City, unfortunately. But I'll go into the ordinance. When I look at this, and 20 pages of dialogue and regulations that we'd have to comply with. Yes, we schedule, but how to comply with it? How many more people are we going to have to hire to figure out how to comply? It's not going to be easy. We use on-demand apps that you might call that scheduling, but they're on demand where employees can trade hours up to the day before. I don't really know how that would apply. And then claims against us. I mean, we'd have to have attorneys. This is going to make it very difficult to operate within the city limits. And my members, a good deal of them operate inside the city and outside of the city. I represent probably a larger, different type of retail, a little from convenience stores, grocery stores, general merchandise, pharmacy, et cetera. So I just see this as creating more regulations and making it more difficult to operate within the city limits. You've got a lot of borders around you. I've got members in Illinois right across the way as well. This will be costly. This will be difficult. And frankly, in the long run, it could be a consideration when we look at growth in the region. We want St. Louis City to prosper, and we want employees to be treated properly. Yes, right now, it's hard to find employees. They can move at will to our competitors, to different industries, light manufacturing. There's so much more out there today. So I just think that this would be really hard on retail in the city and make it more difficult for stores to consider expansion when they're looking at growing in the region. That's all I have.
Are there any questions from the committee? I have one question. You referenced on-demand apps. Do you have any offhand that you're knowledgeable of that your members are using for scheduling purposes?
Yeah, I could find that for you. They sent me the information, but let me dig into it more and I'll get it to you.
Okay.
I don't have it with me here.
I asked the sponsor, and I have had this conversation a couple times with various industries around just online scheduling applications and whatnot. And so I've got a running list of some of them, and just that we're looking into that a little bit further as well. So thank you. I'd appreciate the follow-up. Oh, Alderman Velasquez.
How many members do you have in the city of St. Louis?
Well, I've got some very large members in the city of St. Louis. I probably 60 locations, 50 locations.
60 or 50
Yeah,
locations?
locations, when you take a look at the numbers they have.
So you might mean like some locations might be owned by, several locations might be owned by the same member.
Well, yeah, same member, but lots of locations. I mean, from Schnucks, Quick Trip, Walgreens, Target, yeah, they have multiple sites.
Can you provide that information to us as well, how many members you have in the city?
Okay,
That'd be great. Thank you.
well, that would come over the 50 employees because.
Sure, but I'd also just
people.
like to know how many retail organizations you represent in the city as well.
Well, I represent the retailers. I'm the president of the retailers.
Right, but how many,
Well, I don't know how many tire sites there are, and if they would, like Dobbs Tire, if they would probably fit the 50. I'd have to try to figure that out.
okay, yeah, but it just also would be helpful to find out how many members you have, 50, below 50, as well as over 50. How many members?
Well, I
you
know I have a lot of employees in the city.
Well, if you can add that number too, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have in support, Ms. Betty Douglas.
Hello,
Ms.
everybody.
Hi, Ms. Douglas, could you raise your right hand for me? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I sure do.
Thank you.
Well, you guys have seen me up here many times. Good to see you again, and I'm glad to be here. Like I said, my name is Betty Douglas, and I work for McDonald's and other companies. I'll be 67 this year, so I've been working for a long time. So, and that doesn't seem, I'm just gonna speak from the heart. I've worked a long time, and I work for McDonald's, and I'm gonna use them for the example. I traveled, I worked 4 hours, I traveled for 4 hours and worked for 4 hours and traveled back home for 4 hours. So I was like in 8 hours traveling for 8 hours and only working for 4. If I had a set schedule, it would be so much easier because then I'll know that, look, I need more hours than this, and you've got to schedule me more hours, and I've got to stay there for those many hours. I can't leave early. And a lot of times when work is slow, what they would do was send us home. I was sent home a lot. At that time, I had a dying dad. My mom had already died. You guys heard my story before. My kids with a brain tumor and all, and I was going through a lot. But it's very important that we have a set schedule, because what sense does it make for a person to work a minimum wage and for 4 hours and you can't pay your bills? Not only with McDonald's have I experienced this, I work for Rainbow, which is a woman's clothing store. They did me the same way. I'm a hard worker. I know I am, because if I wasn't, they wouldn't have kept me around for 10, 12, all these years they had me working. So it's very important that I put it out here that everyone deserves to be treated fairly. And everything's going up but our paycheck. And that's a whole nother story. I just went to the grocery store. Lettuce, $1.84. I remember when lettuce was 25 cents. I almost cried. It's getting worse and worse. And these companies, I understand that they're going through things just like we are. The pandemic, it threw everybody off. But we still got to come together. We got to work together, and we're going to have to find a way that everyone is a winner. Not only these big companies, only companies, period. We all got to. What you don't realize, a lot of us have to work 2 jobs because the minimum wage and the way things are going up. We got to be realistic about everything that we're doing. We can't just say that, okay, well, we understand as employees that things are not so easy and things have changed, but we all got to work together with these changes to make it better. So what I'm not going to I'm not going to hold you guys too long, but you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. We've got to work together. We've got to come up with some type of conclusion where not only the companies are prospering, we as the people, the working people that's making things roll, we got to be able to be treated fairly. So I don't have all the answers, but I think that we need to come together. And instead of, it seems like to me we're working against each other when we need to work together. So let's get together and let's make some changes and make it whereas not only the companies are the win-win. Let's make it where we all can win. And it can happen because I've been all over the world speaking like this. And I'm telling you, in Denmark and a lot of other countries, and I know if they can do it, we can do it. So I'm not going to sit up there and go back and forth because I understand that, you know, we got to work together and we're not working together and we haven't. So I'm gaining, I'm thinking, I'm trying to come up with some more conclusions where we can make things work and where we're not always here against each other and saying, well, we need this, we need that, because we all need. The companies need, the employees need. So I'm just saying that let's get together and come up with some type of conclusion where some of us going to lose, some of us going to win, and some of us going to win, and some of us going to lose. But let's come together and stop fighting each other, and let's come up with a conclusion where everybody can win, because it can be done. We in America. Me going all over the world, I've learned so much and I've experienced so much. And I know if they can do it, I believe in America. I know we can do it. So I'm talking over here to you company owners, because I understand where you guys coming from, and I'm talking to you two guys. You say that you don't think the aldermen. I think that yes, the aldermen. I think that everyone should come together, not only us because then we have someone. I know I gotta go, but just take that as thought, okay, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you for that. And just a reminder, comments are directed at the committee, not the audience.
Well, I'm
But
sorry.
no worries.
Well, you guys know how I get excited,
I
so
know.
bear with me.
Thank you.
But let's get together and work together. Oh, let's work together.
Yeah, thank you so much. Any questions? No? Okay. Thank you again. Madam
So
Clerk?
next we have Billy, I believe it's pronounced Gomo or Gamo from Missouri Restaurant Association. Is it Gomo?
Yes.
Mr. Gomo, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman, for the opportunity to speak. Just going to keep my comments very brief today and just speak to you from the heart. Now, I've spent 33 years working in the St. Louis food service industry, the hotel industry. I love St. Louis, and I'm very pro-St. Louis. And unfortunately, this bill is not pro-St. Louis. You know, the best thing that we can do for St. Louis is to be promoting bills that are pro-business. In our industry, we are very pro-employee. You know, I chose this industry early in my life because I liked the flexibility of hours. That works really good during high school. That works really good during college. My early years in the industry as a manager in downtown St. Louis, I had to keep 2, 3, 4 side hustles. And I needed that flexibility. Unfortunately, you know, now what we're doing is we're completely changing the narrative. You know, we are an industry that is very employee-centric. Standing here before you today, you know, I can testify to that as something that has been very good to my family, something that I've worked very hard to accomplish. Now my job is executive director of the Greater St. Louis restaurants. What I see as a state is that we're in growth mode. We have over 12,000 licensed establishments in Missouri. We're a $14.3 billion industry. We employ over 10% of Missouri's workforce. Unfortunately, in St. Louis, we're not promoting a favorable business climate with legislation like this. We need to be pro-business. We need to support an industry that works in very slim margins. My job as it relates to board bill was to call as many restaurants in St. Louis as I could. We have over 714 of them. I couldn't talk to all of them, but I talked to over 100. Overwhelmingly, they had one bit of feedback that they weren't favorable with. They weren't favorable with a lot of aspects of the bill, but most emphasizing on the 14 days out of changing the schedule. In our industry, it's completely impractical. Unfortunately, we're faced with so many things. I do realize that in the bill that you've said for catastrophic weather conditions, there are some reasons that you allow to not have to pay when a schedule is changed and under that 14 days, but there's too many other variables. One of the large event centers in St. Louis that recently had a 1,000-person wedding had to cancel the wedding one time because of the ice storm, rescheduled it, and then the bride bailed. Things that are completely unforeseeable, but they had 250 people on their schedule. In that particular situation, having to pay 250 people for something that's completely out of their control, and I could go on and on and on. And I told you that I would be brief, but there's a lot of those things that we don't really see through and look through and think about all of the complexities of the very legitimate reasons to change a schedule at the last minute. Unfortunately, it has to happen. And it has to happen because the best service that we can do for these businesses is to keep them in business. Keeping them in business is the part that sometimes short-sightedly we don't see. That is the best service that we can do for our employees. Thank you for your time.
Hold on, just in case there's questions. Are there any questions from members of the committee? So just out of curiosity, this is an example that's been brought up a couple times. Are you with the Restaurant Association or
Yes, I am.
An affiliate? So are you? And this is a conversation that I actually had with Buddy separately, but one of the examples that gets brought up with respect to this is someone books a wedding, bride ditches groom at last minute. There are contracts in place with respect to events that are planned, correct? I mean, generally someone is not planning a banquet for 250. Is that?
Good point, but you could never build into that contract, Shane, enough of a guarantee, so to speak, to cover the cost of 250 people times 8 man-hours? Because the bill writes plus 1 hour, correct? So I'm assuming plus 9 hours times 250 people at the prevailing minimum wage is a considerable amount of money. I don't think that you would ever write a contract that would be able to cover that cost.
But we don't take commentary from the gallery here. So with respect to the contracts, though, I would imagine, though, if someone is going to cancel within 24 hours notice, they're going to get a penalty associated with that. They're not going to, just get all of their money refunded. And generally speaking, your hard costs are already going to be paid for. Things like, the food that you're eating, the flowers that need to be ordered for a wedding, things of that, those material goods are already going to be paid for 24 hours in advance. So people aren't going to be expecting their money back with respect to that. And then if there's additional, fees that are associated with manpower, et cetera, largely those are going to, there might be some flexibility currently with respect to that, but those are things that can be negotiated in a contract, based off of prevailing legislation at the time, whether that's, the minimum wage or what their salary is or what have you. Those are things that can be negotiated via a contract. There's nothing that prohibits a contract from saying, a penalty can't be X, Y, Z. And if everyone's on a level playing field with that same contract, then, everyone's on a level playing field with that contract. Right?
I see your point.
So,
but I think that
that would be a complete shift in the paradigm of how those deposits are actually negotiated. I think that there would be a high probability that you could build in all of that cost. You're right about the hard cost, but even the loss of a deposit doesn't cover the cost of the food, the cost of the goods, the cost of the linen.
Sure. No, I understand that, but I think, you know, these types of pieces of legislation are just about what you mentioned, a paradigm shift. Like this is something that, you know, has to get people to thinking about these types of things instead of just, you know, allowing the status quo to continue. So, you know, I know myself and the sponsor are very much willing to, you know, work through the nuances of how these things might work. It's one of the reasons why we're not taking a vote today and we're just having a hearing to get input from, you know, people on all sides of the equation here to learn more. But, you know, I keep hearing that example come up and I just want to bounce the question off of you. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be here and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Next, we have Mr. Tim O'Connell, Greater St. Louis, Inc., in opposition.
Tell me what I should do? Well, I'm not in full karaoke mode, but what do we, this is good? Okay, good. And then I'll, my baritone, I'll take a step back. Ma'am?
Raise your right hand for me. Thank you. Mr. O'Connell, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having this hearing today. I'm Tim O'Connell, and I'm here speaking on behalf of Greater St. Louis, Inc., which is one of the leading civic organizations in the metro area. Greater St. Louis cares about promoting growth and promoting jobs and keeping the engine that keeps people employed and can lead to greater quality of life for everyone in the region moving and working properly. And to that end, core to their mission over the next decade is the STL 2030 Jobs Plan. I'm here today because there are concerns that this bill would have unintended consequences and work as a disincentive to creating more jobs and having more employees and employers come to the city of St. Louis. There are significant costs associated with this bill, both in implementing it and then also just even understanding how to comply with it. I think for all of us who are here, who have read the bill or have gone through the presentation, you know, there's a significant number of questions about how, particularly based on how your business is structured and what the nature of it is, how you would comply. And I think particularly for small businesses, that cost is not a small one. And, you know, my group's position essentially is any sort of disincentive to more jobs and growth is something that we would ask you all to think twice about. We would also observe that the bill is not targeted narrowly. It's really sort of across the board on all employers over a certain amount of employees. And it's not really targeted at businesses that we think are promoting taking advantage of employees. We've noted that other cities do have bills that are much more targeted to certain categories of employers in which there are greater concerns about people taking advantage of employees. The switch, the proposed switch from 15 to 50 employees being the threshold, I think is definitely a step in the right direction. But I think even at 50, it definitely would affect small businesses because certainly there are restaurant groups and sort of family businesses that fit within that. There's some supposed exceptions in the bill for emergency and health workers. Our view is that those are not very clear-cut or very well defined. It's not exactly clear how those would go and how those would be applied and what steps and effects and consequences those would have for those businesses in the employment relationship with their workers. So that's an area that I think really needs to be looked at more closely, and I would recommend that you all maybe seek out employers who work in those fields to get their take. I understand that people feel pretty comfortable that this is a bill that is preempted by state law currently, and so that if in fact it could not be applied and the city would not have any interest in actually enforcing it out of the gate. I guess I would suggest that we all think about, nonetheless, what the regulations are and how it would work as if it were passed today. Because I think if we, sort of got comfortable with the concept of, well, it's preempted, maybe the details don't matter, I don't think that helps either A, if the law is ever changed, or B, if you want the law changed, having a bill out there that has regulations that a lot of businesses have difficulty with probably doesn't benefit anyone. Just a couple more points. We're concerned about the competitiveness of the city of St. Louis. And so for the city to go it alone on this issue, to pass a bill or to pass an ordinance in which this would apply without neighboring counties having a similar bill, we think would be a further disincentive, not just, sort of regionally, but also just with direct neighbors. So I'll close with two points I would make. One, again, I would urge you all to treat it, try to get the language right. Treat this as if it would actually go into effect. Don't sort of just kick it down the road and say, well, we'll fix it later in case the state law gets changed. And then two, I would urge everyone to ask themselves, where do these costs, where are they going to be made up? I mean, it is definitely an increased cost. And is this going to incentivize more jobs and more employers locating in St. Louis, or is it a disincentive? And if it is a disincentive, how much of a disincentive? And are we concerned about it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions of members of the committee? Alderman Ryan, just checking on you.
Questions? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Next, we have Mr. Anthony Scarato. Okay. Mr. Scarato, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in is the truth,
Yes,
the
I
whole
do.
truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anthony Scrato. My brother and I own a restaurant in the city of St. Louis. We're a small business. And I'm just here to speak in opposition because this bill does not make any sense to me. I think it's written by people that haven't owned a restaurant or a small business to understand the difficulties and the time and effort you put in to be successful. You do a lot of these things to keep employees. You want employees to work for you. We need employees. We need labor. So if we are going to do something to force businesses to make it better for their employees, you have to look at it in a different scope. I think you need to be omitting these smaller businesses that are doing this already. We exercise with a software called Spot On. It has a real-time scheduling, so workers enjoy the availability to take off tomorrow, call off, they can swap shifts day of, they can request off in the future for a wedding, whatever. So the lure of working in a restaurant for a tipped employee is, they want to have a flexible schedule, and this would hurt that. And again, to speak on the fact that, we do the best we can for our employees, and I think that we retain is for my own, speaking for my own, what I'm doing, we retain our employees and they're happy to come to work and they like the environment. This would definitely change that and make it harder. So that's all I really have to say.
Thank you for being here. Are there any questions from the committee? No. Just out of curiosity, how many employees do you have?
We have total about 60.
At one restaurant? Or?
Yeah, one location, yeah. And it's, I would say full-time to part-time in that. It varies from season, from summer to, around 60 employees. Anthony Taverna.
I had dinner there not too long ago.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your
No
time.
problem.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
All right, next we have in support, Ms. Finks Jamerson or Mr. Jamerson Ramirez. Is it Ramirez?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ramirez, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Cohn, distinguished members of this committee. Just would like to make a very brief general comment. You legislate for the world you want, not the world you have. I'm actually encouraged to see such strong opposition to an ordinance that really couldn't take effect under the current world, because it suggests to me, it shows to me that these are very important issues. I took note earlier of a comment made by the opposition about a request for flexibility. The status quo does give flexibility, but to the employer, not to the employee. The status quo gives tremendous crushing power to the employer and not to the employee. The world we want is a fairer world where employees have a little bit more control and say over their lives. And yes, there are many details in this bill that still need to be worked out. I acknowledge that. We acknowledge that. But it is not an issue that we can just let go or let up on. Earlier, Dorian spoke about the importance of having, under a union contract, certain benefits. One of those key benefits is a little more control over his work schedule so that he can come out and speak, not just for himself, but for his coworkers and for those who cannot speak for themselves. Non-unionized workers who do not have an ounce of control over their schedules. So I would like to again remind this committee about the importance of moving forward this conversation. Yes, we know no vote will be taken today. Many more discussions must happen. But there will be a day when a vote must be taken. And it is my hope that you will vote in favor of legislation that will create a fairer world, a world we want to live in. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair.
Next, we have in opposition, Mr. Van de I'm not sure, De Gregorio?
De Gregorio.
De Gregorio. Could you please raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Van De Gregorio. I'm a St. Louis City resident. I'm the vice president of the Greater St. Louis Restaurant Association, and I also sit on the board of the Missouri Restaurant Association. First, want to thank Alderwoman Velasquez and Alderwoman Spencer for coming to speak with. Was I too quiet? Okay, good. For coming to speak with us in October of last year regarding this bill and our concerns regarding it. My colleagues have already addressed numerous objections our organization has to this bill. With my time, I just want to focus on the message this bill sends to current small business owners located within the city and those who maybe wish to establish one here in the city. In 2022, according to the Missouri Department of Revenue, food service contractors, caterers, full-service restaurants, limited service restaurants, and cafeterias generated a total of $787 million of taxable sales revenue for the city of St. Louis, making the food service industry one of the largest, if not the largest, generator of sales tax revenue for the city. If it wasn't clear before, the local restaurant industry is the backbone of this city. Based on this data, you would think that our board would enact legislation that encourages growth in the sector and the small business sector in general. Instead, this bill seeks to impose unreasonable and unattainable standards as well as harsh penalties for employee shift scheduling upon our local restaurant owners. In closing, I would just like to point to the recitals of the proposed bill, which states in part, unpredictable work hours can lead to income insecurity. I would argue that your employer being forced to shut down due to economic pressure brought on by excessive government regulation would result in more economic insecurity than any change in your schedule. Thank you.
Hold on, Mr. DiGregorio. Just
Sure thing. Sure thing.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're representing, I know you mentioned you're the vice president of the Restaurant Association, but.
The Greater St. Louis Area Restaurant Association.
Correct.
Correct.
I'm the vice president, and
But
I also sit on the board of the Missouri Restaurant Association.
But do you represent a restaurant in particular here?
I do not.
Okay.
Well, I mean, as
Supposed to.
right.
mean,
I am not a
if your
restaurant
service
owner.
There was also a restaurant
I am not a restaurant owner.
because you have a somewhat famous.
Thank you. Those are my second cousins.
Thank you for the question of clarification, Alderwoman.
I get it all the time.
Thank you, Mr. DiGregorio. Madam Chair, or Clerk.
Yes, next we have Mr. Dave Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is David Sweeney, resident of 63102. I'm here today on behalf of the Missouri Restaurant Association as well as the St. Louis Area Hotel Association, which I was just engaged this morning to represent them. A lot has been said by the various members, so I'm just going to kind of focus on, I think, an important issue here, and that's the preemption under Section 6. If this were to pass, I would assume it would be, it's a law. Now, it's not one would be in place, assuming it is preempted. I think there's still a question. I know we're all assuming that, but I know attorneys as one, if there's any sort of loophole here and they could say that it's enacted now, they're going to seek that. I think if this were to pass, many employees, many people, heck, even I went to law school, but preemption's pretty confusing. And to say, well, it's a law, but it doesn't count right now. When we're talking about the funding mechanism, and we're saying, why would we fund it? No, we're not going to fund it. Then why are we doing this? Why are we sitting here today for obviously folks that care about it on both sides to sit here as if potentially this could change? I mean, obviously I have several clients. They're concerned with this, as they should be. And I simply don't understand why we're focusing on things that are maybe, I mean, we're going under the assumption that they're patently illegal. Let's go down that road. I don't understand why we're doing that when there are things we could be doing. Why aren't we going to Jefferson City to change that state law? Submit a resolution on behalf of the board. Go there, lobby, talk to our city caucus and get that changed statewide rather than focus on simply the city. And as mentioned earlier by Mr. O'Connell, with only the city looking at this, not the county, not other municipalities, not the Metro East is either, simply the city of St. Louis. I do want to make a couple of points that Steve O'Loughlin has texted me, and I'll repeat those. Just as far as Chairman Cohn, you brought up contracts and cancellation clauses. They should have cancellation clauses. That doesn't mean they always do. It's quote, if a volleyball team loses in a tournament, the team checks out. That could happen the day or two beforehand, not the 14 days. Also, events guarantees are usually 72 hours in advance, not 14 days. So although there would be a penalty for the event planner, that you would still require the employee to pay all staff because you wouldn't have that 14-day notice in events. That affects both restaurants and the hotel industry. But I do thank the sponsor for always being very willing to meet and take time to hear everyone's concerns as well as the committee, and hope to continue to have that dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the committee of Mr. David W. Sweeney? Great. All right. I
tried.
It's not often that we have you under oath at a microphone, so I'm trying to think of something here, but I'm drawing a blank. But thank you for your time.
I'm pretty open. I read the paper on Sunday. I'm in there this week. I want to read all my life.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Megan Whitehead, Missouri Restaurant Association, in opposition. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for hearing us. I'm Megan Whitehead. I am the Vice President of the State of Missouri's Restaurant Association. I'm also the General Manager of Anthonino's Taverna. I am an employee, not an owner. A couple of things that concern me most about this bill. First thing was, why would you force small businesses to pay someone for not working? That is the general thing that came to my mind the first time that Alderwoman Vasquez came to meet with us. I'm like, why would we pay someone not to work? That just boggles my mind. The second thing was paperwork. As a general manager, and I am their former event coordinator, losing my job in the pandemic, I had to reassess my career. So I understand, and I'm sorry for the interruption earlier, about event planning. So I do have that side of this business. Like the Cardinals are never going to call our business and say, hey, we're going to cancel the game or reschedule it and our patio's open. So that would never happen. So paperwork. If I asked my front of the house manager the other day, I said, so how many people changed their schedule this weekend? She said 23. And I said, how many would fall under the auspices of this ordinance that is preempted? And she said 6. So that was 6 people in 3 days. If I had to keep the paperwork for 3 years, that would be 9,000 documents that I would have to keep to make sure we were in compliance of this law. And I know Anthony had to leave, but if I told him that I had to find a place for 9,000 documents, I'm sure we would have to, that's just a personal impact on our. The next thing is preemptive scheduling. I totally understand people that need a schedule to work. That makes sense. I understand having to have a schedule and then traveling for hours and then having your schedule change. That I understand that creating some kind of fairness for that would be very important. But in our industry, it is completely out the window. They love that flexibility. I think we have 3 real estate agents, 6 construction workers, we have nurses, we have paramedics, dental hygienists, that these are their second jobs. if something happens in their regular job, they need that flexibility. The other thing that is hard for me in this bill is 90-day new employee. New employees get 30 days. Even though we spend a lot of money and time training them, if they don't fit, if they can't accomplish the job, we couldn't possibly pay them for 90 days for something that we can't work out how they do. So that's another thing. So I know that the CEO and the Restaurant Association has talked to this board about a $10 million cap for support if the business is in that cap, and changing it from 15 to 50 is very impactful to this board bill, to our restaurant employees, staff, and association. I just want to say thank you again, and please, let's do a lot more work before this bill is anywhere. But again, don't make it that we pay people not to work. That would wreck a small business. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No? All right. Madam Clerk.
So next we have in support, Ms. Rhiannon, I can't pronounce it, Deraye. How do I pronounce your last name?
Duryea. It's Rhiannon Duryea.
Rhiannon Deraye. Ms. Deraye, raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
So thank you for having me this afternoon. My name is Rhiannon Duryea. I'm with SEIU State Council. We represent over 10,000 workers from across a variety of industries, from healthcare to property services. What we've heard from workers today, such as Dorian and Miss Betty, and what we've heard from workers across the city, some of whom wanted to be here today, but ironically had their schedule changed at the last minute, is that the status quo is not working. We know that corporations and their lobbyists are using state lawmakers to rig the rules against working people. And Board Bill 104, knowing that it is unenforceable, is about beginning to build a vision that centers the needs of workers and sends a message that we cannot any longer accept the status quo. State lawmakers, acting as the henchmen for corporations, seek to tie our hands for now, but we don't accept that they have cut the threads of community care here in St. Louis. They may have tried to cut those threads in 2017 by stripping away hard-fought gains, one right here at this board, but we still are here, and the community care needs are greater than ever before. Board Bill 104 is about sending a message to the community of St. Louis workers that you are here with them, and together we can reject the status quo and build a vision that is worth fighting for. Thank you.
Hold on, just in case. Are there any questions? No? No? Okay. Thank you.
So next we have in opposition, Mr. Robert Whitehead, retired chef, Missouri Restaurant Association. Mr. Whitehead, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
So help me God, I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I was asked to speak as an employee, but as somebody who's been on both sides of the fences, both making schedules and being the victim of terrible schedules, I can understand the opposition to both. And honestly, as an hourly employee, I can't find anything wrong with the bill. You know, it benefits me as an employee, but I understand as management why they're opposed. And as if I was in a position of management right now, I'd be opposed too. But that's not what I want to say. One thing that hasn't been addressed here is, you know, the buck stops here. So you're asking restaurants to incur another cost that payment has to come from someplace, and it's going to fall on the customer. I mean, you have already seen restaurant prices rise because of the cost of the product they have to buy. I mean, you experience that in the grocery store today. We have to incur the same increases in prices. So now you're asking us to incur another cost to the running of our business where our margins are already so low. That's going to get passed on to the customer. And so we're eventually going to see customers are going to, they're already having a tough time making ends meet. Now you're asking them if they want to go out to eat as a pleasure, as an amenity to their lives. Now you're asking them to pay more because of what you're trying to impose on restaurants. So I'm looking at it from the customer's point of view. I mean, I'm already spending a good, I can't go out to eat at a decent restaurant for under $100. And that's going to be now what, 120, 130, because I have to pay for things that are out of my control. We were earlier in the sessions, we were talking about spending tens of millions of dollars on a convention center. Well, are those people now going to want to come to St. Louis and have to pay the prices they do in restaurant because we have to increase our prices? So I'm looking at it strictly from a consumer point of view who has an understanding of how restaurants work. We can't afford to absorb the cost and not pass it on to the customer, or you won't have restaurants. We'll be out of business. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Anthony Favaza in opposition. Mr. Favaza, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Hi. So my name's Anthony Favaza. I was born in St. Louis, raised in St. Louis. I left when I was 18. I've lived in Washington, D.C. I'm a corporate attorney. I worked in New York City for 7 years. I worked in Silicon Valley, just outside San Francisco. In short, I've lived in a lot of the places that were cited as places that have done this. And I'm here because we don't do this. When I was deciding to become an entrepreneur and decide where I was going to live with my family, the business climate in St. Louis was very appealing to me. And compared to the places that were mentioned as examples of places that are doing this kind of stuff, St. Louis at the time had a lot of advantages. And I'm very concerned to see those advantages fading away. My family, I'm a fourth generation St. Louisan. My family has consistently been in the food business, going back over 100 years to a stand in Soulard. One of the things I think is important to point out, the 50-person definition that was put on the screen said annual number. I don't think anyone in this room understands what that means. Last year, I opened a restaurant in St. Louis. Our target employee number was 18 to 20. On an annual basis, I employed over 100 people. Once you settle in and you have established people, and my father has had a business for almost 50 years in the city, and he's had many people for 20, 30, 40 years. At my other locations, I've had people for 5, 6, 7 years. I've been in business 8. So I'm working towards having that stability, but opening a new restaurant, you really go through some people just trying to find the right fit. So my 20 employee restaurant employed over 100 people last year. And there was talk about a 13-person Starbucks and 14-person. I guarantee you, Starbucks, all those places you're mentioning that employ a target of 15 to 20 people, they have over 50 employees on an annual basis, for sure. So if nothing else, please hear me that definition needs to be cleaned up to say, and I don't know how you define it, but it can't just be if someone comes in for 3 days and disappears, that's a nick in my count toward 50, because we're not a 50-person, 50-employee business by any stretch, but the way the definition was on the screen, we would be. Another thing I want to talk about, there was the wedding example, and Mr. Cohen, you asked a lot of good questions about contracts and all that. And you also talked about if there's a level playing field, we're all on the same playing field. And there's been some talk about this, but St. Louis is unique, as I think everyone knows, in the way our municipalities are structured. If I'm looking to book a wedding and I'm a groom and a bride, and the contracts in Maplewood and Clayton don't have these crazy cancellation provisions that say you have to pay for every employee in full unless we get, 14 days notice. I mean, that's a factor. That's a real factor. So to see us take another step against competitiveness, even vis-a-vis our immediate neighbors, honestly makes me sick to my stomach. And I can't understand it. Next topic is about balance of power. And we've heard a lot of testimony today. I wrote some quotes down that I couldn't believe. I think the most recent speaker in favor of this bill said non-unionized workers don't have an ounce of control over their schedules. I can tell you today that is not true. It feels very much like the opposite is true. I mean, I think a lot of people here will tell you, employees come in, a lot of people, it is their second job. They say, this is what I have available. I can work these 3 days, these 4 hours. I mean, we're constantly, to find the people that we need, we're on the receiving end of what's available, how does this work? To say they have not an ounce of control over their schedules is absolutely false. Back to the wedding example, I think there's probably some better examples. I don't know how many of you are City SC fans. Anthony Scarrato was here earlier. He has a stand at the new soccer stadium. I own Amaghetti's. Amaghetti's has a stand at the soccer stadium. You guys follow soccer at all? You know about the CONCACAF tournament we just had? So there were 2 games, and if they needed a tiebreaker, they were going to come back here. We ended up losing in Texas.
Your 5 minutes.
Gotcha.
I'll let you finish, but
well, I'll give you a different example just to close it out. I don't know who remembers Joe Buck saying, "We'll see you tomorrow night," when David Freese hit the 11th inning walk-off home run in Game 6 of the World Series. My dad had a contract to feed all the media people at Busch Stadium, and we didn't know until after midnight that there was going to be a Game 7 the next day. And that is not in any of the exceptions here. I don't know how you're supposed to plan for things like, talk about high school volleyball games, but soccer tournaments at the professional level, baseball tournaments. How does this affect Busch Stadium? All the small businesses support that. It's really ludicrous that we're doing things to actively turn away business from the city of St. Louis. Final point.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off because you're already past your time limit. But
well, we got to talk about robots because we're not operating in a silo here. I got a guy I'm paying to make crusts for cheesecakes. I can spend 30 grand and buy a robot and replace him. That's a real thing. I got 12 cashiers at 3 different locations I can replace with self-order kiosks. You are pushing me to robots. So if you're pro-jobs, you're against this bill.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Favazza. Any questions? None. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Mr. Chris Saracino. Mr. Saracino? Yes. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing the opportunity of this process to speak opposed and in favor of BB 104. My name is Chris Saracino, and I represent my 3 establishments in the city of St. Louis. And I respectfully ask the board 104 bill not be passed. The bill is way too broad and is very much an overreach of city governing body. The bill will tremendously negatively impact our city establishments, especially mine. Why? Operationally, it's almost impossible to post a 14-day advance schedule without thinking there will not be changes. There are many variables that go into trying to schedule our employees. Predictability of a typical business day in our restaurant is almost impossible. If we give our employees a current if our current operation currently uses 7-shift, Alderman Cohn, you asked about scheduling apps. It's called 7 shifts. You probably heard it. So we currently use that in 2 of our locations. But it is our job to create a positive and fostering work environment for our employees. And I think it is admirable that you would like to protect worker rights. But I think this current bill in its current state will come at a cost to businesses like mine, because there's a lot of things that are not clear and are far too much hard to attain under our current existence. The luxury of predicting consumer behavior is almost impossible for us in our current business establishments. We're not an event space. We have reservation type systems in 2 of our locations, so we don't have the ability to really predict what our business is like. And some of the comments in favor of this bill, I agree, stating the status quo doesn't benefit the employee or the employer. But within the restaurant space that I operate, and I specifically speak upon my experiences in which we have, as a collective family group of restaurants, over 60 years, sometimes flexibility issues are not under what the owner can control, which is hard with regards to scheduling. So I do appreciate the opportunity to speak. I am not in favor in the current language of this current bill, but I do appreciate the process and the opportunity. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Sorry.
Are there any questions of the committee? No. Alderman Narayan, just not hearing any. Thank you, Mr. Saras. I was actually just having breakfast with a constituent at your place last week. So
appreciate it.
Delicious oatmeal.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for adjusting that.
That's all. We don't have any more.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that concludes the testimony for today. Alderman, I don't know if you
That
have
does.
any.
I don't know if you want me to wrap up.
I mean, it's typical for folks to be at the podium when they're presenting, so. Right.
Chair Cohn, members of the committee, I just first want to say thank you to members of the community for being here, for taking time noon, and for your thoughtful comments. As I mentioned at the start of this meeting, I'm not asking for a vote on this today. I would say, as Chair Cohn has already mentioned, we know that this bill has some work to be done. So, our next steps are to take some of this feedback and incorporate it into a full committee, another committee substitute. So with that, do you all have any questions for the?
Are there any questions of the committee for the Alderwoman from the 6th? Alderman Browning.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone who came here today to testify on this bill as well. It's been a long but really informative meeting. Alderwoman Velasquez, could you tell me who you talked to in the course of drafting this bill and revising this bill?
Sure, we talked with Missouri workers about the bill. I heard from some folks too. I talked with Jeremy Alhaj, who's not here today, and then I heard from some workers back in, gosh, I want to say maybe that was December that we had a meeting. And then I also had the meeting as referenced with the Missouri Restaurant, some members of the Missouri Restaurant Association in the basement of Favaz's. Very lively discussion, as well as another meeting with Buddy here and the owners of Bartolino's, as well as I've talked to Dave Bailey, who owns several restaurants, one of which is in my ward. I talked with Danny Eichenhorst, who owns several different restaurants as well.
Thank you. It sounds like you did your homework on this, that you tried to talk to people who were affected, and today have arrived at this bill. I know we're not taking a vote today, but I do want to thank you for the time and effort you've taken to write what you think would be a fair and thoughtful approach to this. I don't have any more questions for you. I just want to say I think that I agree preemption is complicated, and that this bill might not be the best vehicle to deal with something of this nature because it sets up a new office. It adds $500,000 to the general budget that we wouldn't know how to pay for. A lot of things that it's an overly complicated vehicle to do via a trigger bill. But that being said, it's been difficult to listen to a lot of the testimony today because it's very clear that the status quo does not work for workers in our city. And I get that it's hard. I'm hearing from all the restaurant-related folks about the difficulty of scheduling. But I've only heard empathy from a few of the people who talked today about the plight of the worker who is trying to deal with their schedules. Multiple times, employees with second jobs were mentioned as a reason to not have fair scheduling, even though employees with second jobs would probably love to have more predictability in their schedules. So that's the kind of space where I think we could be talking to each other to come up with rules that really work for everybody in this situation, because it's very clear to me from hearing people today that the status quo is not working for everybody in this equation. And I do think that this room would be full of workers today if they didn't have to work. I noticed that some people testified and then rushed out the door because they have jobs to get to. So, you know, I just want to say, I think this is, because this is a trigger bill and not a real thing that we could do for the workers, I'm not sure if it's worth the time and the effort it would take to make this a bill that would work for everybody. But I do think that if we have that opportunity in the future, we should take it, because I do want to see a fair situation for everybody. And this is just to kind of make a shot over the bow in a way and say, hey, this isn't working. We can talk to each other and we can figure out some better conditions for everybody, because that predictability in the schedule matters for the employer. I hear that, but it also matters for the employee. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman, for your comments. I agree with you.
So that concludes the hearing for today with respect to Board Bill 104. I do want to again express my appreciation for everyone being here this afternoon and sitting through a very topical discussion on workers' rights and commerce here in the city of St. Louis. I also want to express my appreciation to the Alderwoman 6th Ward for all of her due diligence and hard work over the last several months with respect to this board bill. I know it's not easy being in the middle of these discussions sometimes and leading the conversation, but I think that you've done a lot of work and put a lot of energy and time and whatnot into this bill. And so I do want to commend you for that as well. Look forward to continuing those discussions with you and working on this. But at this point in time, the Board of Aldermen has a 2-week recess coming up next week and the week after. And the Alderwoman and I have had some conversations around what the next hearing will look like. That is still to be determined at this point in time. But certainly we'll keep those who were here today apprised of next steps in our process. We're trying our best not to catch anyone off guard, trying to get as much feedback as possible so that we can make this bill more reflective of the St. Louis City community, and something that I don't know if we'll all be able to agree upon, but at least be able to move that status quo out of that status quo and into something more. But I think I speak on behalf of the committee, but really do appreciate everyone's perspective and deliberations during this conversation today. So more to come with respect to the meetings and the bill itself, but thank you for being with us this afternoon. And certainly if you have any questions or comments, you can email the sponsor of the bill or myself as chair of the committee. And if any of you have testimony that you weren't able to share because of the time limits, you can certainly send an email to myself, and I'd be happy to include that in the record of the committee hearing for today. Or if you have colleagues, friends, family members that weren't able to make it today and they have something that they would like to submit, feel free to have them email myself or the clerk, and we'll make sure that that's added to the folder, the drive, relative to the legislation that's pending before the committee. Other than that, back to the agenda. We don't have any further discussions or items for review. I don't have, well, I'm currently working, Madam Clerk, with the clerk on scheduling a follow-up meeting for a separate bill to be heard later this week. Board Bill 228, which we introduced on the floor last Friday, still needs to have a hearing this week. We're tentatively scheduled for 1 p.m. on Thursday this week. So hopefully we'll be able to square that away and get it confirmed. I just want to make sure that that is on folks' radar. So that is a TNC meeting this Thursday at 1 p.m., tentatively scheduled and noticed. But the only agenda item on that meeting will be Board Bill 228, which is a lease agreement concession arrangement out at the airport. I am moving things around here. I believe we had all alderpersons present today, so we don't have to excuse any aldermen. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. It's been moved by the Alderman 6, seconded by the Alderman, that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, we stand adjourned.